So today we are going to discuss about this failure theories, stress strain, plane stress, plane strain, and then some material models which is typically used for modeling the material into answers or any FEA soft test. So basically when we look at the deformations, this deformation can be divided into multiple phases. One is elastic deformation. This is what an elastic, which is completely recoverable, means it is not going to deform permanently. It is showing some kind of an elastic behavior. Recovery is there, and in that there is two ways by which we can define it. One is instantaneous deformation, and another is a time dependent. This comes under some part of it. Elastic viscoelasticity will be related to this. Then if you look into the plastic, this shows a permanent deformation into the component, and that is what can be again divided into two parts. One is instantaneous, another is a time dependent. So in elastic, when I am going to apply a load onto the component, so what is going to happen? It is going to that if I am going to remove that particular load, it is complete deformation is going to recur back. If it is deformed within a 5 mm deformation, so if I remove the load, that deformation will come back to 5 mm. There is no any kind of a permanent deformation you can observe it. So that sort of things is called as an elastic deformations. Another one is if you load more, means if I go on applying more and more load and higher level of load, so there is what are the molecules sitting with near to each other, they will have a large amount of separation, and due to that there is they are finding difficult to bring back all the deformation it was happened, and that is what it will cause a permanent deformation. That is what it is called as a plasticity. So when we look at the mechanical behavior of the behavior, and so this mechanical behavior can be divided into any of these 4-5 categories. One is elastic. First step will come to the elasticity. Then it will second stage. These are the stages through which it will go on failing it till this fracture, and fatigue and creep are something different. So in this case, what will happen? First of all, it will go into, if you look into the stress strain diagram, this is my stress and this is strain. So initially there will be an elastic, so it can be recovered back like this, and after that elasticity there will be a plasticity. So that plastic deformation is going to happen, and if you still load more, it is going to cause a failure. That is what it is called as a fracture. These are the stages through which this material behavior you can observe it. And another one here, it is in a fatigue. Fatigue means if my particular component is failing at static loading at maybe in a 300 Newton per mm square, and if I apply the force of cyclic force, means with respect to time my force is varying with maximum and minimum within a certain frequency f. So this particular amount of 300 Newton force, it will not sustain up to 300, but it will fail below that, maybe in some 100 or 150 Newton mm square. So that is what due to it is going to happening due to this cyclic loading and kind of things, and that kind of part is called as a fatigue part of it. Another one is when you keep any component under the load continuously for more than a day or for longer time, I can say it is a longer time, that will cause a permanent deformation, even whatever this amount of load is below its elasticity. And so that is what it is called as a creep of that particular creeping, it is going to happen it. And that is what it is going to affect more in case of high temperature cases. If I increase the temperature, so this creeping will be a more predominant, and it is more dominating kind of behavior you can observe into the material. So when we are going to model this material, means there are different phases through which we have seen it. First of all, when you start loading, so it will come first, it is coming to an elasticity. then it is coming to when a yield point, then it is coming to when a plasticity, then fracture. So there are different phases through which it will work out, and these materials can be divided into, materials can be represented into any of these four particular models. One is elastic model, it is called. Then viscoelastic means it is a kind of a fluid property. Viscosity is a fluid property and it is related to fluid. That's what it is called as a viscoelastic model. That plastic model and viscoplastic model. In viscoelastic there is a recovery is there. In viscoplastic there is no recovery. It is showing us kind of a permanent deformation into this. So when you look into the elastic models, so whenever you are going to load it, so you can just look at this particular graph. So this is what it is called as a linear elastic model. When I go on increasing the load, it is following this path and it is reaching to this. And then if I go on decreasing the load, it will follow the same path. This is what it is called as a complete recovery of the model. Complete recovery or completely reversible process, which we studied in thermodynamics, complete reversible process, in which it is expected your system states are under quasi-static state, quasi-static condition, static equilibrium condition, and under that condition only it will be following the same path in loading as well as same path in unloading. It will follow the same kind of a path in both the direction. So that is what it is called as a complete recovery. And if this behavior following in a something straight line behavior, then it is called as a linear elastic model. In this linear elastic model, you can just look at, if I consider this is one point and this is my another point, I can now write an equation. Sigma is my output or y-axis parameter, then maybe in a constant plus I will have some slope, I will say it is m, and another axis is x-axis is epsilon. So as this curve is going to pass through the origin, so this is equal to 0, then I can have a sigma is equal to m into epsilon, and this m is nothing but a slope of this curve, and that slope of the curve is nothing but a Young's modulus, in fact, Young's modulus. And that Young's modulus is nothing but a property which tells behavior of material up to its proportional limit. Yesterday we had a test in that it was asked, so what is the linear behavior? Linear behavior is nothing but a stress strain relation is valid up from 0 loading to the proportional limit. This is what it is called as a proportional limit. Okay. And similarly, if you have another way, that is this is what a behavior you can find in all the metals and component with a somewhat more strength. If you look into the rubber type of material, so you can observe this is not in a straight line behavior. During loading, it is following this. Unloading also, it is following the same path. So, but the curve, it is not in a straight line. It is like kind of in a parabolic kind of in a curve. And this curve can be represented like this. Sigma is equal to, I can say it is the C0 plus C1 epsilon plus C2 epsilon square, like this. This is the second order model. So C0 will be here, it is 0. C1 I need to determine based on the fitting of the curve. Ct also it will be determined. It is depends on square of something strain, and this type of behavior is called as a non-linear behavior because it is not following a linear property of material, and that's what it is called as a non-linear behavior. And this type of springs are also there in the market, and this is what you can use it for. Most of this has huge applications like in a suspension system. There it is used. There are two types of spring you can have it. One is called as this is what one type of behavior will be there. This may be following this path and coming back here. This may be this kind of behavior, another will be this behavior. and in middle there will be a straight line behavior. This is completely linear behavior I can have. So this is what it is creating in a soft spring, and this is what it is creating in a hard spring. Soft spring means what is going to happen, as I am going to increase the load, it is creating a larger deformation. That is what it is called as a soft spring. And if I am going to increase the load, if you look at this particular curve, for a smaller amount of stress, so it is very small amount of deformation you can observe it. But in the same amount of load, if you observe for this particular curve, here you will get in a large amount of deformation. That is what it is called as a soft spring, and another one is a hard spring. So you can now just look at this is what the way you can represent material behavior. Similar fashion, you can just look into the viscoelasticity, how it is going to happen. When the solid material have some fluid-like characteristics. So before going for this, I will give you one important stuff into this. So in this case, if you look into the stress strain curve, on one axis we have a stress, on other axis we have a strain. So this is my stress and strain. Here the slope of this stress strain, this is E is nothing but a slope of whatever the stress strain curve, and this is also called as a Young's modulus. And this here, for this particular line, if you look at this line, my E value is 0. Means it is a ideal fluid, it will come. Ideal fluid means if I am going to apply any kind of force on the fluid, it is not coming back, but it is continuously deforming. That is what it is called as an ideal fluid. And if you look into this particular line, okay, so vertical line, the E value is infinity, means it is a infinite amount of strength is there. Even though if I am going to apply the infinite amount of force onto this particular line is going to show me a deformation 0. So this line is called as a rigid line. This is a rigid line, rigid body motion. And now this is a ideal fluid, this is rigid body, and your entire this is also ideology we are considered whenever we are doing an analysis. This is one more ideology, but your behavior of the material is now lying between this point to this point. So if I take this type of behavior, I can say it is in a metal behavior. If I take a lower strength wala behavior, then it is a lower strength materials. If I go on having a multiple curves following this, so this will move towards a fluid type behavior. This is a fluid type behavior, fluid behavior kind of things, and here it is in a more and more rigid behavior, and you are somewhere metal structures fall into this particular category where E value comes to be 2.1 into 10 raised to 5 Newton per mm square something. So this is what a typical value for steel. But if you look into this in fluid type of structures, so here you can observe this is what an ideal, and you are somewhere it is going to show me this type of curve. This is what in a fluid behavior you can observe. So actually this particular stress strain curve will tell you all the type of materials into a single graph. It is like this. So that's what, whenever the solid which behaves like in a fluid, which has a behavior as in a fluid like characteristics, this is fluid like characteristics, said to be a viscoelasticity. Fluid like characteristics means we have observed one thing, whenever the flow is going to happen into the pipe, we assume that at this point and this point the velocity of my graph is 0, here V0, and here is also V0, but at middle point I will have a V maximum, and this follows in a certain curve in this fashion. And this is one layer, and this is a second layer, and then third layer. So these layers are going to create a shear stress among that I can have a shear stress like this. That shear stress is directly proportional to change in the velocity, or we can say velocity gradient. This is my x-axis. So this already we studied it, and then tau is equal to mu into da by u by da by x, and mu is nothing but a viscosity property. And that is what it is. This shows in a viscosity because it is directly related to fluid and fluid velocities and like this. So this is what in a fluid like behavior. Some of the material like in a paint, maybe in a some kind of in a liquids, semi-solid liquids will show you this type of viscoelastic behavior. Fluid is something which flows easily when subjected to loading and cannot keep to any particular shape. It can change. It continuously changes the shape. That is what it is going to happen. If fluid is one extreme and elastic solid is in another extreme, and then your viscoelastic behavior is somewhere in between it. That is what it is going to happen. So if you look into the characteristics of this curve, so what is going to happen? It is going to show you some permanent type of deformation, and that is what it is called as a possible permanent deformation into this. So during loading, it will follow this particular path, and unloading, it is going to follow this path, and it is coming to this point. And what our amount of this is nothing but a permanent deformation. I can have permanent strain you can observe into this particular material. This is, and these curve, loading and unloading curve will not coincide, and it will form, this is kind of a hysteresis slope, you can observe it, and that hysteresis slope you can see it here. There is a dependence on the rate of straining is also there. Rate of straining means if I change the rate of straining, means if I am going to loading like this, I am going to change the rate of straining, it will show you this way. So this is what in a different rate of straining. This epsilon dot as an epsilon 2 dot, it is having a higher value of a straining, and it will show you another curve like this. And so that is depends on this one. And there may be a possible, maybe sometime you will get in a permanent deformation or incomplete unloading phase. So that is going to happen. And rate of stretching, whatever the stretching or straining you can say, that it still depends, that is viscoelastic material depends on with time. That is what it is also going to happen. If you look into the plasticity, you can find in a particular way of it as plastic means it is showing in a permanent deformation. If you look into the stress strain diagram once again, this is on stress, this is my strain, and this is my stress. If you apply the force onto this, so as it is going on, this is my particular, I can say this particular is having a proportional limit is up to this. Okay, I started loading into this direction, it has reached to this particular point, and then I am going to come back from this loading, it will follow the same path. So it is not going to show me any kind of a permanent deformation into this. As I go on increasing the loading, as it reaches to certain plastic zone, so this is a plasticity, this area is a plastic area, and as you are going to unload it, it will follow this particular curve, but it will not follow this because it has caused this much amount of permanent deformation, and whatever this amount, this is I can say it is in a permanent, and this will show us an elastic deformation which has got recovered it. So that is what it is going to happen. That's what we need to now identify this particular point where this is going to deviate it. So this is up to this, it is following this loading and unloading and complete recovery of the material, but after this it is going to change the behavior, and that behavior is to be modeled, and that is possible by knowing if my epsilon value, that is E value, that is Young's modulus is going to change. Obviously I need to take into account there is some kind of plasticity is going to happen. So there are two different ways by which we can model the plasticity. One is by providing a threshold limit. This is my limit, within that my behavior is an elastic limit. That is one thing. So threshold limit, and that threshold limit is typically called as maybe yield point or something. Beyond this point, it is assumed to be your material is not no more elastic behavior. It will not no more shows an elastic behavior. That sort of behavior is called as plastic behavior. And very small amount of deformation also, after that it is going to show you the permanent deformation. And plasticity model is particularly useful in describing permanent deformations which occurs in the metal, solids kind of things. Okay, so when you are going to deal with such things, it is to be dealt with in three different parameter. One is your E value. This is my Young's modulus value. That is an elastic part. Next part is, this is my yield stress value. So this is what in a second point. Up to this my behavior is this much, or maybe under uniaxial tension and kind of things you can consider. Then third one, how behavior it happens. This behavior may be if my material don't have any kind of hardening, it will follow this curve. With hardening, it is going to show me this particular curve, and if I am going to still hardening more, it will show like this. Means I need to decide which curve I need to take into account, any of these three curves, and that is possible by hardening modulus. Hardening modulus is nothing but a slope in plastic branch, plastic region. This is up to elastic region. This is what an elastic region, and this is what my plastic region. In this plastic region, what is value of my E matters a lot, and that is what it is called as hardening modulus, or slope of that plastic branch kind of things. So that's what, whenever you are going to model material within two lines, one is this line, linear line, it is going to show. Another is this line, which is showing behavior in plastic region, and that can be defined into three parameter. One is Young's modulus, then yield stress, and third one is tangent modulus also it is called as. This also in most of the books, or it is called as a tangent modulus. Tangent means it is going to change the path of this curve at this location, and then tangent is taken at this point, and that is called as a tangent modulus. So this plastic behavior can be modeled into two ways. One is consider two curves. This is what two curves. This is my first linear curve, or I can say it is an elastic curve, and this is my plastic curve. Means my elastic curve is valid up to this point, and beyond this it is up to this point, it is showing me a plastic behavior. So that is what it is called as two lines. That's what it is called as a bilinear behavior. In this bilinear behavior is decided by yield point and my E value. So these 2 points are most important into this. So after this plastic region, there is another equation. I can have one equation here. So I can have a stress is equal to maybe some tangent modulus. I will say it is epsilon Et into epsilon, and here it is in a stress is equal to A into epsilon. These two equations are together used to model any plastic behavior. That is what it is going to happen. So there is another way. By now I can have multiple lines I can model it, because your material behavior will not be all the time in plastic region like in a simple straight line. It may behave in this fashion. So I need to take account of all these lines, or entire curve also. So this type of I can now join this with multiple lines. That's what it is called as a multilinear. Now I can have as it is, this is a stress is equal to E into epsilon. This is my up to this point. After that I have one more equation here. This is my second equation, this is my first equation, then my third equation, then my fourth equation. Likewise I can go on adding more and more lines, and I can model that particular behavior of the material. That is what it is called as a multilinear elastoplastic. Elastic also there, elastic behavior also you are taking into account, and also plastic behavior. That's what it is called as an elastoplastic model or a material model. In this case you can observe here it is simply it is shown if there is no hardening into this, it will be considered to be a straight. Here it is itself it is considered to be a failure in the material. In bilinear hardening, you are going to provide some amount of hardening, and that is what it is represented by slope of this, because it has two lines. That's what it is called as bilinear. And in multilinear, I can have here E2 value is there, then E3 value is there, then E4 value is there. Likewise, I can have multiple E values into model, and whenever you are going to enter into nonlinear analysis in the answers somewhere. So this all you should know it, how to enter the data, what does that E value means, why we need to give more tangent values, tangent modulus values or something. So this is what on a behavior. So we have seen material behavior. Now we want to do a 3D analysis or 2D analysis. If I consider a simple box type of structure, or I can say it is in a brick type of element. So in this brick type of element, I have a node situated at all the corners, and each node is having 6 degrees of freedom. So this is at a total 4 plus 4, 8 nodes are there. In this 8 nodes, and each node is having a 6 degrees of freedom. So each node will its 24 degrees of freedom for this. Means I have only one single element in the FEM will show me on a 24 by 24 matrix. Means I have to have 24 equations, 24 unknowns are there. So obviously then it becomes too much difficult when you are doing a very complicated analysis. So it is now necessary to reduce this number of equations. So for that purpose, there are two concepts comes into the picture. So one is called as a plane stress condition, another is called as a plane strain condition. In plane stress and plane strain conditions are conditions typically to reduce the number of equations required for 3D analysis and convert that 3D analysis into 2D analysis. That is what it is called as a plane stress and plane strain conditions. In this plane stress and plane strain condition, so you can just look at some of the cases, like taken a simple typical example of the beam. So this is my beam. 3D beam you can look at this way, and it is fixed at this end, and I am going to apply the force onto this. And force, we assume that there is no change in the force in this direction. I will have this is my z direction, this is z direction, this is my x direction, and this is my y direction. Okay. So when you are going to model this, you can observe one thing. The stress in z direction, I can have a z direction like this. This is my 0 z direction, and then I can have this direction, and I can have the stress at this location, and everywhere I can have a different stresses I can go on determining. Means I can have one more plane here. So this is one more plane I can draw it here. The similar way another plane is there. So likewise I can have multiple planes, parallel planes in z direction. And if I go on analyzing each plane in the z direction, I observe the pattern of the stress in each plane remains same in x and y direction. This is my x-axis and this is my y-axis. Pattern of the stress or deformation, it is going to show me a same kind of behavior here. And but in z direction you have not applied any force in z direction. So obviously stress in the z direction becomes 0, and you need not to do the analysis in z direction. You should be only happy with doing an analysis in 2 dimensions, that is x and y. I need not to worry about what is going to happen in z, and then that kind of conditions will come. That is what it is called as this particular plane is called as a representation of all the planes in z direction, and that is what it is called as plane stress. You are converting 3D model or multiple planes into a single plane, and here that plane is nothing but a representation of entire z direction stress variation and x and y direction. So that is what it is called as a plane stress condition. And the similar way, if you consider the dimensions are very large in one direction, and that is what it is called as a plane strain. We'll just look at that also. So in real life situation where all stresses and strain associated with three dimensions, many times we make a proper assumptions for simplify the solution, because our engineer's job is to make the things more simplified, not to make anything complicated. Make it simple. If whenever it is possible, consider it is a linear behavior or something or kind of things. That's what it is in the first assumption, to make it simplified solution and analysis of mathematical without model. And most important, it is not going to much more affect the solution. It is not going to majorly affect the solution. Then and then it is assumption is valid enough. In the mathematical term, state of plane stress is one in which the stress in z direction is a 0, because you are not applying any force in z direction. Obviously stress is 0. So stress is 0 in z direction. But in plane strain, what happens, in the strain associated in the z direction is considered to be 0. And plane stress, my stress is 0, and here plane strain condition, I have an epsilon z is 0. So that is what two conditions are to be taken into account. And then physical understanding. So if you consider two plates, one is thick and another is thin. So if I consider thick plate, it will representation of plane strain condition. And if I consider thin case, I will represent within a plane stress condition. And this will convert ultimately. So just now I told, if I am going to do an analysis in 3D for a single element of a brick type, it will have 24 equations. Okay. If I consider only rectangular element, I have only 4 nodes. I have to consider only 2 dimensionals. This is my 3 degrees of freedom. One is rotation about z. 3 into 4, it is having a 12 number of equations. Only 12 number of equations are are satisfactory, or I can say it is a 12 number of equations are sufficient enough to represent the behavior in 3D. And that is what it is in a, this kind of a conversion is necessary. That is 3D to 2D, and only you have to solve within the 12 equations, you are getting the similar kind of results. And that is what the conversion is necessary. That is the 3D component, 3D model into a plane stress condition or plane stress condition like this. So if you look into the plane stress, just now I told this z direction, this is my z direction, this is my z direction, and in this z direction, this plane or any of the plane in z direction, behavior on that particular plane in x and y plane, it shows in the same behavior. But in z direction, you are not applied any kind of a force, and that's what it is. The stress coming in the z direction becomes 0. The stress, 0 stress in z direction, and valued for components in z dimension is smaller than x and y direction. That is what it is the case. And z strain is not 0. It is some value will come in z direction all the time. And thickness is, some small thickness is allowed for it, and it is used for structures like plates, flat plates, or thin discs, under which this plane stress condition most of the time it exists. If I take a spanner, and this is my spanner, and I am going to do the analysis of this spanner, and I want to know where the stress will be more. So in this spanner there is some amount or small amount of thickness is there. So I need not to consider stress variation in this direction, that is the direction. So I will be happy to know variation of the stress x and then y direction. I want to know where the stress in this particular plane, not in z direction. So in this type of conditions are called as a plane stress condition. So if you look into the types of equations, this is what in a 3D equation you can just look at here. Sigma x is there, y is there, z is there, tau x, y, all these are things there. So now I can have on a sigma z is 0. So similarly I can have the stresses coming in that particular plane, z direction, that is on x plane or y plane in z direction, that also becomes 0. So obviously I am going to reduce the 3 equations directly. This is sigma z, I am going to reduce it, tau xz and yz. These three equations I'm going to reduce it, and I'm only relying on sigma x, sigma y and tau xy. So this is what three equations are sufficient to know about it. And then further relations, and you can create three equations, sigma x, sigma y, sigma z. And this, instead of going for 6 equations at a time, you are only satisfying your problem or solving your problem with only 3 equations. It will be much more easy in terms of a computation. And that's what this type of condition is mostly used whenever you are doing any complicated analysis in you're using an FEA. That is what in a conversion you are going to do it. So if you consider a thick plate subjected to stresses along an x and y direction, and strains are associated in x and y direction along with the z direction. Strain is also there in z direction through a small subject to a Poisson's contraction. Due to only Poisson's contraction, it is going to happen. So this type of condition is typically called as a plane strain condition, and that plane strain condition you can just look at like this. This is my z direction. Strain in this particular direction, because you are going to apply the force in this direction, x and y direction. So you are not going to apply the force or anything in this direction. Obviously, my strain in this particular direction becomes 0, and that's what 0 strain in z direction. And stress will not be on a 0 here. Sigma z will not be 0 in this case, and that is what is most important. It should be taken into account. And this type of analysis, whenever there is in a long constant cross section structures, long and constant cross section structures like pillars or beams kind of structures can be analyzed using the plane strain condition. So these are the typical example for a plane strain condition. If I have a cylinder having a long length, I need to consider only plane of that particular cylinder having a certain thickness. I can now analyze this. I need not to worry about what is going to happen in the z direction. I will be only interested in x and y direction. Similarly, I can have on a wall, retaining wall or dam wall structures where this plane strain condition exists, and we can see it. So in this problems are pipes where you are taking long strip footings, retaining walls, gravity dams, tunnels. All these conditions falls under the category of plane strain condition. So here you can see the equations as we have on a strain condition. That's what epsilon z is 0, and along with stresses, that is a shear strain in z direction also is 0, and that's what it is. 3 equations will get reduced to the 0, and only 3 equations remains as it is: sigma x, sigma y, and tau xy. And this is nothing but a law for it. Law means it is nothing but an equations you are representing for it. So you can just have a comparison between plane stress and plane strain condition. In plane strain, we are assuming z direction stress is 0. Here z direction strain is 0. Here z direction strain is 0. And this is a plane shear stresses in z direction are 0. Here strain are 0. It is epsilon z, and here it should be an epsilon. And only sigma x, sigma y, sigma z are non-zero values, and here it is in a sigma x, y, z and tau x, y are non-zero values. Likewise, you can just look at these relations. So quickly we can say the plane strain, one component of strain is assumed to be 0, that is typically z component. Z component is considered to be 0, that is the strain component. Okay. Here it is a plane stress component is considered to be 0, and there is no shear in any of the out of plane condition. That is what it happens. So there is another way by which we can represent 3D complicated complicated structure into a 2D, that is called as an axisymmetric models. In axisymmetric models, what we do it, we have an axis of symmetry, and in this axis of symmetry, I need not to means if you look into the cylinder, this is my cylinder, and we are going to apply the pressure from inside. This is what pressure from inside. I can now have a multiple symmetry. This is one plane of my cylinder, then there is another plane, then similarly I can have a third plane like this. Okay, similar fashion I can have one more plane like this. So these planes represent in the same behavior. Means if I, this is the axis about which if I rotate this, it will produce in a cylinder, and that's what I can now only analyze a rectangular type of shape having in a certain thickness like this, and I want to now know the what are the stress values and strain values within this range, and this particular plane means any of the plane is nothing but a representation of this. And so entire CAD model, any of the plane you can take it out and do the analysis, will result the same values at in the all the planes, and that is because it has an axis symmetry, and that's what it is called as an axisymmetric problems. You are going to convert it in terms of an axisymmetric. That is the thing that is going to happen. Axisymmetric structures are generated by rotating the line or curve. This you know it. I will not go in details. So in axisymmetric, then theta will come into the picture. Stresses in theta direction and z direction. These values will become 0. And your equations will be like this: radial stress, then z stress, and then theta stress and shear stress. These 4 equations will come into the picture, and these 4 equations are sufficient to do any 3D analysis quite easily. It will be nothing but I will not say it is a 3D analysis, but it is nothing but a representation of 2D analysis, 3D analysis into 2D. So we'll now look at theories of failure. What are the different theories of failure? I think so. Here there are different theories of failure. We have seen it whenever we are doing this is analysis, structural analysis. We should know whether our component is going to fail or something, because in FE analysis it will not show you the complete breakage of your component, because that kind of a behavior you are not representing into this, and that behavior is possible by if you are going to real life behavior or real life materially, if you are going to embed into the ANSYS or any FEA tool, but that is not possible, and that's the reason whenever we are doing an analysis, we should know when my component is going to fail, and that for that purpose people have collected the information. Now this theory is when particular component is going to fail or something, and these are the few theories they have come up with. So one is maximum principal stress theory, then maximum strain theory, strain energy theory, distortion energy theory, maximum shear stress theory, octahedral stress theory. So these are the few theories which will tell you about this. And it is assumed that failure occurs in the material when it starts exhibiting inelastic behavior. Means if I consider a stress strain curve, this is my strain and this is my stress. This is what on only one dimensional loading I am going to consider. This is nothing but my yield point. Up to this it is considered to be an elastic behavior, or it is going to recover it. My stress value is going beyond this value, it is considered to be a failure, because failure into any of the mechanism is considered to be a failure if it is not going to follow certain its functions. That is what it is called as a failure. So failure occurs when material exhibit inelastic behavior. Means if my loading is somewhere here, it is inelastic behavior it is going to show, then it is considered to be a failure. In brittle and ductile material, different modes of failure will happen, and that is depends on type of a loading. And ductile material, you can find yielding quite easily, you can find it, and also it shows in a large amount of plastic deformation before failure. So this is what happens in ductile material. But in brittle material, what is going to happen? It is not any kind of a yielding you can observe it. and there is in most of the time sudden failure is there, like in a chalk piece or any cast iron metal or glass. These are all comes under the brittle metal. It will not show you deformation, significant deformation, and that's what this is factor of safety should be higher in this case. And also there is a yield stress is to be considered as a material property, which tells the particular failure in this case. So this is what a typical difference of this ductile material and brittle material. In ductile material you can see a significant deformation, and this shows in a very large deformation before the failure. But in brittle material it will not show you this much amount of failure, deformation. It will show you very small amount of deformation and suddenly it will break down, and that is what it is called as brittle material. And that's what in ductile material yield point is considered to be a failure, and brittle material yield point is or ultimate failure point, failure stress is considered to be failure. So these are the few things as I think we will just discuss further part of it. So if I consider it as a maximum principal stress theory, means if I consider a component, just take an example of shaft. So this is my shaft, maybe in a propeller shaft or any shaft. It is here, it is in a motor is there, here it is in a gearbox, it is connected. So this motor is going to apply the axial force. I can have axial force, there is a torque is also there, or there are certain pulleys are mounted on it, and there will be a bending force also there. That's so it is taking care of, it means it is account of bending stress is there, shear stress is there, axial stress is there. But in case of UTM, what we are doing, we are only applying an axial force. We are not going to apply any torsion force or anything. And whenever we do in a material testing, what it happens, we only apply one type of load. We never applied combined loading, and that due to that it may cause a problem. This type of loading here you are doing, and practically your system is like this. So how to correlate these two? This is that for that purpose there is a concept called as a principal stress and principal plane cell come. And yesterday we have a discussion on transformation techniques, transformation of the stresses, and we are going to determine the plane where my stress value is a maximum, and that is what in x direction I have an x1 stress, sigma 1, sigma 2, sigma 3. If any of the stress is more than this yield value or equal to this value, then it is considered to be a failure, and that's what maximum of any of this. If it is less than this, no yielding is going to happen. I mean, this is a safe one, and this is onset of failure. I can consider this as a failure, and this also considered to be a failure. And this is what the way this principal stress theory is assumed. I need to identify plane where the stress is maximum under any combined loadings. Maybe an axial loading is there, maybe torsion is there, maybe bending is there. All these loadings are taken into account, and we need to know somewhere some plane is there on which the stress is maximum. That stress should not exceed your yield value, and that is what it is called as a maximum principal stress theory. So it is represented with a typical box in 3D, that is sigma 1 and sigma 2. So this is nothing but a limiting point. What are the point coming inside this box are safe, and if any point coming out of this box is called as a failure. So that's what this is what in a box represents in a safe zone, and failure represents out of box. If some point is lying beyond this particular box, then it is considered to be a failure. If I consider 2D case, I can see only rectangle. That's what you can see here. Minus negative yield stress value, positive yield stress value, negative yield stress, positive yield stress, and this is nothing but my safe region within which my particular model is a safe. And if some point is coming beyond this, is called as a considered to be a failure. So that is what it is you can consider. So you can convert further into strain and so many things you can do it. Pure shear also, so many things are there. Don't worry about it. These are simple relations. You can just go on doing it. And then another theory is called as the most important theory is the Von-Mises theory. And in Von-Mises theory, so whenever we apply, it is a typically hydrostatic loading. In hydrostatic loading, what is going to happen? All the direction you are going to apply the force. Applying uniform stress from all the directions on the body. Large amount of strain energy can be stored. And it is experimentally verified. This is most relevant to it. And which will change the volume, change the size and volume, both the things it is going to do it. And this is what this is based on energy theory, and that's what it is associated with energy. If you go into the mechatronics point, maybe you have gone through one subject like control system. In that case, you have learned how to design a controller. There are different type of controllers are there. There is an energy based. One is energy based controllers are there. These energy based controllers are most it will give a better control over other controllers. So still research is going on it. So same way, if you look into the particular model behavior, if you consider energy as one of the major parameter, and if you derive your entire relations based on this energy understanding, it will give a better understanding what is going to happen into this. And this is what it is, the way it is going to happen. And this volumetric change and will be stored into volumetric strain energy, and volumetric strain energy will show me a failure region, failure of this, and strain energy causing material failure, which is minus distortion energy associated with the shear. And this is what typically causes diostric stresses, first invariant diostric. All these should result into the GU. And for that purpose, some derivations are done for 2D case, 3D case, and so many things. And finally, we got on some equation, and these equations are like this, and which shows it is not typically, if you look into the previous case, this is my positive negative yield point, this is my positive yield point, and in principal stress theory, we have seen rectangle shape. Here it is showing an elliptical shape oriented at 45 degrees. So this particular region is considered to be safe, and away from this region is considered to be a failure. So this is what behavior. These are the point where are on the set of failure. These are the point on boundary of this particular ellipse is considered to be an onset of failure. So similar fashion you can define into pure shear, pure, and all those things. If you go on comparing this all theories onto one single platform, that is what in a comparison. So there are various theories, Rankine theories there, which is typically used for brittle type of material. And this is what shows in this elliptical, it shows Von-Mises stress theory. This is what in a Rankine's theory is a principal stress theory. This is what in a Saint-Venant's theory. So it is a maximum strain theory, principal strain theory, and strain theory, then principal stress theory, and all these are compared here. So you can just look at this graph, and various materials are tested. One material is a cast iron, another is a steel, then copper, aluminum. If you look into the cast iron, this is nothing but a symbol, green plus symbol, which shows it is going to fail, and it is following this particular graph. That is what in a Rankine theory. And this is what, that's the reason whenever you are going to do an analysis of the brittle material, we need to do a Rankine theory. That is what called as a principal stress theory. Because it follows behavior like this. The people have done that analysis. So steel is my ductile material, copper is ductile material, and aluminum is my ductile material. If you observe the behavior of this, okay, so here you can observe this behavior of this, all the three materials are followed by this elliptical shape, and that elliptical shape is followed by one Mises and one Mises theory, and that's what one Mises theory is the most suitable for all ductile material. These are the theories are nothing but a representation of behavior. So which behavior is represented in what context? So those are to be applied, and that's what whenever we are doing an analysis of ductile material, we are following one Mises stress theory, and that's what whenever we do an FE analysis, professor most of the time ask you, tell me what is one Mises stress, how much is it is there if you are doing an ductile material, and if you are going on an analysis of brittle material, he will ask principal stress, what is the maximum principal stress, because this theory follows this brittle material follows Rankine theory, one Mises theory will be followed by ductile material, and that's the reason in most of the analysis you can find one Mises stresses are there and kind of things are there. This is what for today's session, and I think we have finished our time also, and we'll discuss rest of the part as we go on producing further. One more thing I would like to tell you, there is a similar kind of relations, you can just review it, steady state heat transfer relations, that is there are 2-3 principles. One is conduction principle is there, then convective, and then radiation. We are only dealing with conduction as well as convection. We are not nowhere going in radiation part of it. And this is what a typical comparison of steady state heat transfer, that is thermal conductivity matrix and stiffness matrix. In thermal conductivity temperature analysis, temperature is considered to be a basic variable, and structural analysis, displacement is considered to be a basic field variable. This is what a field variable I can say, because you are going to do the analysis. Here it is a temperature is again a field variable for temperature or thermal analysis. So here it is in a force, that is a stress is nothing but a force upon area. Here it is in a heat flux, it is called, that is Q upon area. Here it is in a temperature. In case of temperature, you can find in a shape function like this. Here it is in a same kind of principle, you can find it for stresses. So these are nothing but an analogy. Here it is in a stiffness matrix for temperature or thermal analysis, thermal conductivity analysis. This is for structural analysis. More or less same. Only if you change one of this. Here, if you want to define an stiffness matrix for in case of a structural element, you should know A, E, L. The rest of the matrix is the same. Here it is only you are going to change in temperature analysis. Thermal conductivity value, length of my component. So that way only this will change, will give me a thermal conductivity matrix. If I am going to substitute AEL, I am getting a structural stiffness matrix like this. So these are the way we can do a comparison and we can do the analysis. So next time onward we'll look at how to do a programming for this particular FEA part of it, and I am going to give one or two such demonstration onto this. So for today it is thank you, and I will take in a few questions from your end.